The current sentiments and the local discourse is that everybody is an outsider except an indigenous Naga belonging to one of the Naga tribes.
I was with a family in Dhubri, which is the border with borders Bangladesh. The people from both the sides speak the same language, look the same, wear the same clothes. Then they told me, "Didi, dekhon, Bangladeshi." So I was just thinking, I said, my God, that's the outsider.
The Muslims who are staying there over generations, successive generations, over centuries, these people are targeted as Bangladeshis. These issues are created. The politicians, what they do is they make one group outsider and create kind of threat perception. This is the threat for the state. Then what happens is you stay away from the question of development.
I think that this whole creation of the fear, it's actually not created by the politicians. They make use of it.
There's a new law that's coming up that children from women marrying outside, we will not have anything to do with Nagaland. But man who's married from outside, they have full rights to, everything that a Naga would have.
The stories of the outsiders are not given space neither by Godi media nor by the liberal media. You write mail to the liberal spaces, they will not even reply.
The degree of how hospitable you are determines who is an insider and an outsider. But the moment this question of outsider comes, you suddenly become not hospitable, indeed hostile.
Northeast, it looks nice and all, but it's no European Union. So an Assamese is as much an outsider in Mizoram as a Mizo is an outsider in Nagaland.
Welcome to the 6th edition of the Media Rumble, produced by Newslaundry and Teamwork Arts. We welcome all of you to this session, Who's the Outsider? Amit Kumar, Nazimuddin Siddiqui, Nona Arhe, Sangeeta Barooah, Suraj Gogoi, in conversation with Samrat Choudhary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Who's the Outsider? Handing it over to the panelists.
Hi. Welcome everyone. So our topic is the insider-outsider issue in Northeast India. And as all of us from the region know, and perhaps now an increasing number of people outside the region also know, it is an issue of a great importance, a fractious issue which keeps coming up year after year. It's been there for a very long time. I think I would date it to well before the independence of India, but it's definitely been around for a very long time. And in recent years, it has become spilled out from the region and become an issue that has become of national interest and importance, because I think some issues which have their roots in Assam have sort of, some acronyms from there have become familiar to the rest of the country. Acronyms like NRC and CAA, which arguably also goes back there. So there has been excellent reporting on some of these issues, and I hope they have introduced people within the region firstly, and of course outside the region as well, to these issues, and also to a very important point, which is that the Northeast is a region of immense diversity. There are many different kinds of people and communities, and it is very far from being a monolith, which sometimes is the picture that builds up, for example, maybe in Delhi. There are literally hundreds of languages, and it's a region of 7 or 8. And I say 7 or 8 because the inclusion of Sikkim sometimes still feels a bit odd. Now, if states, so if I start counting 7 states in, say, for example, some other part of India. So let's start from Kanyakumari. So Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, I'm counting contiguous states. So Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir. So if I count 7 states from south to north, I can do a full Bharat Jodo Yatra. So 7 states is what we have in the Northeast. And it's smaller states, but they're still quite large area and a quite diverse area. To go beyond the headlines and without further ado, since time is short, I will just dive straight into the questions. And my first question is for Nona, who is from Nagaland, and she's come here from Kohima. So, I would ask Nona, who is the outsider in Nagaland? Who would be considered an outsider in Nagaland?
Thank you, Samrat. I think from Nagaland's perspective, the current sentiments and the local discourse is that everybody is an outsider except an indigenous Naga belonging to one of the Naga tribes, whose belongingness is demarcated by the district that he comes from, So only they are the insiders, and everybody else is an outsider.
So does that mean that, for example, a Naga from some other part of Nagaland would be considered a bit of an outsider in, say, Kohima, which is in the Angami area? So somebody who comes from, say, Eastern Nagaland, would they be considered a bit of an outsider?
Definitely and absolutely. I think there, at every level, there's a classification of who is an outsider. So the classification can go to different levels depending on where they come from. Yeah.
Okay. It gets quite specific. And does it have any implications? I mean, what happens if you're an outsider?
Well, I think Nagaland is they have 17 tribes, and tribalism is something that has been a big problem. So, for example, Kohima is an Angami area. So, for somebody from the north, somebody from like Mojo or Zeneboto, if they come to Kohima, they'll feel a bit like an outsider and probably even bullied. But the same will happen to an Angami if he goes to Mugokchu. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And okay, why do you think it's like that? What's the origin of this?
So I guess it boils down to the question of the existential question. I think when there's a threat, even within when there was less population, I think people were okay. But now with growing population and everything is getting scarce, I think this is becoming even more and more.
Okay, interesting. So Sangeeta, you've done a lot of work on this issue, right? And I'll take the same question to you. I mean, what is it that drives this politics or this sentiment of the insider and the outsider? Not necessarily about Nagaland, but maybe about Assam or about the Northeast in general.
No, I agree with Nona. It's actually so region specific. Even she boiled it down to put it down to district, you see. So I remember, when I was writing this book on Assam Accord, that was the time when this whole NRC thing was being updated. And morning I was with the family in Dhubri, which is the border with borders Bangladesh. The local people said that we'll take you to to this river. There's a river called Gangadhar, which we call it Gadadhar. So both sides, there were people fishing. So on the Bangladesh side and this side. So the people from both the sides speak the same language, look the same, wear the same clothes. Then they told me, Didi, dekhon, Bangladeshi. So I was just thinking, I said, my God, that's the outsider. So as we keep coming and and then I met another family whose wife had committed suicide in a very small tin tenement, and because she had no papers, and the family origin, I think many generations ago from Bihar, so they have no contact with that family, so she couldn't establish, and she was being bullied to find papers, and she committed suicide. And that man was like, he had to learn how to cook, and he was telling me everything. So I was very moved, and that day I drove down to Upper Assam, and that was the Bihu time. And everybody was celebrating, and I just told my mother, I said, this is what I saw today. They said, Dhubri. She said, which side? Okay, many look at them also as Bangladeshis. So the people who, when identifying somebody, pinpointing it will be earlier in the day, are actually being looked as outsider if you move away from this. So I completely agree with what she's saying, So it is that, So that is how, and then if you put in politics there, okay, it's a lethal combination, and Assam is an acute example of that at the moment.
At the moment, and for quite a while before the moment also. Right. So, Nazim, this issue of, who's the outsider, automatically the moment we talk about Northeast India, I think especially now in the context of the NRC and in the context historically also of what's gone on there for a while, I think the issue of religion also comes in, religious identity in addition to linguistic identity. So what are your views on how this issue is being constructed and how it's shaping up?
I think it is fully constructed. Thing is that when we talk about outsider, on what we are discussing, like Sangeeta said, okay, let me be very specific. If you see community-wise in Assam, if you see who are outsiders there, then there are many communities which are en masse targeted as outsider. For instance, you see the Adivasis there. Adivasis are living there for centuries. These are the people who were taken there by the Britishers during colonial era, and if you go there and visit and see their socio-economic status there, it's very pathetic. Their representation in universities, their representation in politics, their representation in institutions in different parts of the state is very sad. Then another community, for instance, it's a conglomeration of various communities, but the community that is suffering discriminations on the basis of this outsider tag is, as just Sangeeta pointed out, from other parts of Assam is, other in the sense, the eastern parts of Assam is the Miyas. Miyas are a community that is originally from East Bengal, that was part of colonial India and what was divided again as East Pakistan, and then it became 1971, it became Bangladesh. So this community is targeted there largely in every aspect, in every aspect of their social life, political life. And not only these two communities, there are many other communities. For instance, if you talk about Bodos, Bodo is a tribal group which consists of 4% of population of Assam. Bodos, till that time, they didn't start a movement called Bodo movement, which of course was very violent, arguably. But till that time, they did not get their rights. Now they are getting economically, they are doing somewhat better. But earlier, their interests were not given any priority. Their issues were not heard. So in Assam, there are many communities.
Is this an issue of unequal development, or is there an ethnic dimension to this?
Of course, if you see the greater issue is underdevelopment. So these issues are created. Okay, the politicians, what they do is they make one group outsider and create kind of threat perception. Okay, this is the threat for the state. Then what happens is you stay away from the question of development. You don't ask good schools, you don't ask good education institutions, you don't ask good healthcare system, you don't ask good roads, you don't ask anything. You just say that Bangladeshis will take over Assam. Now, who is these Bangladeshis? Bangladeshis are the people, I mean, the Muslims who are staying there over generations, successive generations, over centuries. These people are targeted as Bangladeshis. And
why?
Why? Because
why are they called Bangladeshis? I think the background is a bit. It's interesting to have a short introduction to the background.
Okay, this is completely a construction. I mean, This community, I also belong to Miyas community. I do not have anything to do with Bangladesh. Of course, the history of Assam is the history of migration. Many communities, all the communities in fact, they have migrated from one place or another. For instance, we call the Ahoms. Ahoms is the community which ruled Assam for the longest period of time. Not the entire Assam, but part of Assam, significant part of Assam. They also migrated from some other parts, but long back in 13th century.
1228.
Yeah. So every community has migrated from one place to another. Likewise, the Miyas also have migrated from East Bengal to Assam some 100 years back. But now, targeting this community, why, if you ask why this community is targeted, because targeting things makes easier for the politicians. And many people fall prey to this thing. And the political leaders are using this very nicely to keep the state away from development. If you see Assam, there are hundreds of problems which needs to be focused. But if you take that, okay, Miyas are taking over Assam, it's over.
Okay.
No questions are asked.
Sangeeta, would you like to add something to this?
I think that this whole creation of the fear, it's actually not created by the politicians. They make use of it. The fear has always been there because, as you said, entire Northeast, not just Assam, is made up of a diversity, of people. And people are, they're very few in most communities. I mean, like, if you say, look at Manipur, if the Métis are the majority, but what is their population? About 13 to 15 lakhs, okay? So it's like that, we all know Mary Com, what is the Com's population, maybe in a few, 2,000 or maybe 1,500 people, okay? So it's that fear of the other taking over, okay? And that fear has always been there. And I actually feel that the Indian state has not been able to address this fear in a meaningful way. Like, they tried, okay? I mean, like, what we see are these instruments like the autonomous district councils and all. There's no mention of these in the constitution of states and all of that. Where does this come from? These are instruments being built to address this. But in the process, as he said, Nazimuddin said, there's no development that comes to it. So in the borough areas now, this is the third accord that has happened, okay? So I'm waiting for the fourth one now. So this is what, and the politicians, what they do is, they try to make use of it because they don't need to then do development. They will put one community against the other, And if you look at Assam particularly, during the Assam agitation time, of course, the agitation took a religious turn too, okay? But we should not forget about what happened in Nelly. So the thing is, after that, there was a lull, The people felt, God, what is happening, I mean, like little children being killed, butchered like that. So, last 40 years, there was at least some semblance of, I see people trying to come live next to each other, okay? But now what we again see is that it's being again played with, okay? So then what happens? I mean, if another 30, 40 years, one would need to come together. I mean, it's perhaps will become worse, yeah.
And the basic thing underlying all this, the fear of the outsider, the basic thing underlying it is migration, right? I mean, it's basically the fear that people are going to come in from across a border which has been drawn fairly recently. And so this fear of migrants, fear of internal and external migrants has been happening for quite a few decades now. I wanted to just bring Suraj into the discussion.
Okay, I just want to add one more thing, when you talked about this
Sure.
migration thing. Like, we talk about, say, there are also man-made borders now, like a tree that the Mojos think from where they were all born and all that is right now in Myanmar. So,
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring Suraj into the discussion. So Suraj, this fear of migrants, it has been around for many decades. the thing is that we've also had these mechanisms, institutional mechanisms and efforts, most recently and famously the NRC, to try and deal with this fear, to address the issue. Now, do you think that these mechanisms will ever come to a final conclusion?
No, I think let me begin by responding to Sangeeta's point on Nelly. Not all, but a few graves of the victims of Nelly, on their tombstones, their names are marked in Assamese. There was a question that a journalist asked once to Hannah Arendt. The journalist asked her that, despite Nazism, why are you still committed to German language? A reply of Arendt was that, well, the language didn't go mad. But to that, philosopher Derrida responds saying that, no, actually, language can go mad. And this fear that you speak of, I believe, comes from maddening of Assamese language, which is the sort of basis of nationalism, very intimately linked to the concept of outsider. And that depends from whose point of view are we talking of the outsider? Now, from the point of view of a caste Assamese, there could potentially be two outsiders that I can think of. There could be more, of course. The first is, of course, the quote-unquote Bangladeshi as an outsider, which has a long history of migration, as you pointed out. The other is also the tribal, as Nazimuddin sort of pointed out, that there is a certain distance of the tribal from. So in that sense, they are internal other and external other, to use a category. So in that sense, I think, of course, the category of the outsider, migration, everything collapses to the metaphor of Bangladeshi, which we saw in case of Jahangirpuri, even that it doesn't matter whether you are a Bengali Muslim or not. It carries that weight of designating a kind of an exclusive sort of identity to this. So I would say that, of course, the category of outsider encapsulated through all these is kind of a specter that haunts the Northeast.
Okay.
I would like to just add one point to him about the language. Nagaland was earlier part of Assam, and it was separated from Assam in 1963. Even one of the reasons that Nagaland got separated from Assam was Assamese language was imposed on Nagaland, and the result is Nagamese language, right? So this linguistic hegemony is there since, for a long time in Assam. That is there. If you do not speak Assamese language properly, there are people who will tell that he cannot speak Assamese language properly. How can he be Assamese? So that is there.
Would you like to come in on this, Sangeeta?
Yeah, because you have to take note of how the language became the marker of identity, the community's identity. It goes back to the British era, okay, when Bengali was imposed. Yeah. So there was the whole, the Bengali hegemony was to be fought with. And then when you see this whole thing trickling down, you will see now that the Boros were the first to revolt. Okay, then of course we have the Boro language now. And then the Boros are imposing, I said, "Ye to Boro bhi nahi bolta in my Boro area." Okay, so it is now coming down to that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the history that she's talking about, the history of imposition of Bangla, that is basically after 1826, when following the Anglo-Burmese War, the Ahom kingdom was integrated into the British Indian Empire. And after its integration, it was included in Bengal presidency, and the Bengali language was made the official language in Assam. And that was, in many ways, the root of many of the issues and problems between linguistic identities which followed in subsequent years. So, Sangeeta, in your book, I found a very interesting point in your book about the Assam Accord. And it's basically about the recent roots of some of this identity politics, which relates to the emergency. Right? You've written about the emergency.
Yeah.
And Golab Borbora and Morarji Desai. So could you please tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, because I looked at when I started digging that period. Of course, then you had to go back, partition and beyond. Even British era and all. So then when you see this whole thing linearly, and of course this Assam agitation, why it happened, and so that time I was looking at this whole emergency thing. When two things, when I grew up in Assam, we were told that partition didn't affect us. Why it didn't affect us? Because the books don't talk about it. Books only talk about North India. Okay, so we have Punjabi literature and all of that about partition and all that. I'm very aware of all this. But in my backyard, what was happening, I had no clue. Like for example, one part of Assam had gone away. And that is how Assam has two valleys now, Barak Valley and Brahmaputra Valley. Then look at Tripura. Okay, so all these histories were there. And when you look at the whole Assam issue, then you can't forget partition. It's also the fount. So that was there. And then another thing I always heard people saying that emergency didn't affect Assam. Okay, why? Because Congress won elections there for. Anyway, so, but then it's not just the winning. And soon after that, the first non-Congress government, the Janta government, was formed in Assam, which you mentioned about the Assam Chief Minister, then Gulab Borbora. So, and Morarji Desai was there. So, during my digging, I just found that at that time, KPS Gill was live and I had interviewed him. So he said that, this major reason why this whole unrest was pushed by these Janta people, in this bulk, because Indira Gandhi was looking for a place to contest elections at the time and nobody would give her a seat, So then Congress rule was there. So they said, you contest from here, first enter
Mongoldoi.
Mongoldoi. So whole thing began from Mongoldoi after that. Of course, she didn't contest from there. She contested from Karnataka. So, but and that is where I think that this whole conversation, there is a very important conversation between Morarji Desai and Bordoloi I mentioned in Delhi. Okay, so that is where this whole thing you see. And much later, lot of at that time, there was a senior bureaucrat at that time, and he has also written a book where he mentioned that this was, triggered by that. And at that time, the whole people are here talking about Bangladeshi as a Bengali origin Muslim. But at that time, Bangladeshi was, of course, nothing to do with religion. It was a good Bengali speaking, And also the outsider thing was also Nepalis, because there were many Nepalis who were pushed out of Bhutan and had to come and stay there. And also when after 1962, when the roads have to be constructed at the time, so a lot of Nepali laborers had come from Nepal and from what is we call Darjeeling and all these areas. But because it was a Nefa at the time, so nobody could settle down there after work. So they all settled in Assam. So they were also looked at as now outsiders coming.
Right.
Just add a little bit on partition. Yes, Sangeeta is right. The partition history, when we talk, the partition history of Assam, what has been the impact on that state, is not written much and it's not discussed much. My grandmother, there was a huge riot in Assam after the partition. It happened in 1950. And most of the people from my community, they are illiterate. You go to Assam and you will see it is the most of the people have not got the chance to take formal education. So how they remember their age, the elderly people, they remember their age, ki my son was born during the time of riot. So what was the riot? Riot happened in 1950. And what is this riot? Riot, they call it right. Righter bosor, they will tell like this, righter bosor, right kayar. So 1950, what happened? Many people means in thousands, they had to migrate from Assam to East Bengal because their houses were burnt attacks were unleashed, and these people I'm talking about, are Miyas. Many people had to flee India, and they had to take shelter to East Pakistan. In 1951, there was an agreement signed between Nehru and then Prime Minister
the Nehru-Liaquat Pact.
Pakistan, Liaquat. This is called Nehru-Liaquat Pact, 1951. And after that pact was signed, these people came back to Assam again. So yes, this history, as we are discussing outsider today, so the burden of partition fell on that outsider then. And the burden is continuing on these outsiders now in 21st century today.
And one thing I quickly want to add, particularly women from the Northeast, what they face this when we are talking about the outsider business, is like if you marry outside the community. Okay, so now there are a lot of states where they're trying to bring in laws. Okay, so it's directly linked to land. Land is a major issue about identity. It's very closely linked. So if you are marrying outsider, so you cannot get benefit or anything, can't be counted as this thing. So when I was part of this, even in Assamese non-tribal society, I married somebody from Kerala. So when I was discussing this with someone who was very pro NRC and various things were happening. So the gentleman told me, he said, why are you so bothered? You anyway married an outsider. So my voice is taken away. But then I reminded him about Bhupen Hazarika, who was married to an outsider. I said, is he an Assamese or not? So I think the women face across, whether it's tribal or non-tribal, when we're talking about the outsider issue, we also had to take note of this.
Right. Yeah, of course, there are so many aspects to this identity issue. And in fact, about speaking about marriages, I think I've often heard back in Shillong talk about rhetoric of purity of blood. And I think that is also still there. I think Arhe might know also about, is it there? It's very much there, right?
Very much there. But I think I also want to go back to what I said earlier about outsiders in Nagaland. And I think if I don't say this, I might get into trouble. And which is, there's a growing recognition for Nagas, all the Nagas living in the rest of the Northeastern states, and also including Nagas from Northwest Myanmar, So their wish to be, to live together as one entity in Greater Nagaland, if their wish is being accepted by the government of India to do so, So, but till the time that happens, even those Nagas who live in Assam, Arunachal or Manipur, they continue to be outsiders, So in terms, in terms of sharing anything in Nagaland, whether it's property or any other benefits that the government gives them, the state government gives them, they do not have the right on any of those things, Right. And coming to the marriages, I think there's a new law that's coming up. And again, I'm also half, my mother is from the Angami tribe. So there's a new law that's coming up that children from women marrying outside, we will not have anything to do with Nagaland. But man who's married from outside, they have full rights to, everything that's a Naga would have,
Okay.
Well,
so that's also one of those lines of fracture. Yeah, good luck.
We'll find a new state ourselves.
And the issue of religion, right? So I think it was there right in the beginning also. The issue of religion, religious identity, and of course it's there in NRC and CAA. So, and now the nationally dominant politics is definitely there in Northeast India as well, even in unlikely places like Nagaland. So, Suraj, how would you characterize this relationship between Hindu nationalism and Assamese nationalism?
That's a very difficult question. I think let me begin by stating something that happened very recently of granting indigenous status to Assamese Muslims. And this section of people have publicly said that religion does not matter to us. And I don't think this is coming from a place of freedom, to say the least. When a Muslim says that my religion doesn't matter and I want just in private spaces, I think this is a serious case of unfreedom. And this is where I think there is an organic overlap of both nationalisms, and I'm stating in plural because they have different origins. And we ought to recognize that origin. And let me briefly also sort of direct the conversation to a different zone about the outsider by saying that perhaps we can think about this concept of hospitality. If you are hospitable to someone, the degree of how hospitable you are determines who is an insider and an outsider. And as societies in India, we are all known to be very hospitable to our guests and to others. But the moment this question of outsider comes, you suddenly become not hospitable, indeed hostile, and all forms of negative emotions flow in. And when this category of quote-unquote Bangladeshi is brought into the fore within Northeast, and this takes many different identities. If you go to Mizoram and Arunachal, the Bangladeshi is a Chakma, who is a Buddhist Chakma. So in that sense, how hospitable we are, I think, is a mark of who is an outsider and not.
Okay. We have to talk a little bit at least about the media. And I want to ask Amit. Amit, you're in the local media. How free is it? Can you tell stories freely and fearlessly?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have enough money to fight cases, I guess, because right now we are facing a few, which is a good thing. But a lot of things that have been discussed here. First and foremost, I sort of disagree with let me first state that I am absolute outsider in the Northeast. I was a Jharkhandi from Bihar and I landed up in Assam. I don't know how, but I got a job there. So, but I'm here on behalf of East Mojo. So, in terms of the stories that we do, there is no terms as outsider in Northeast because you can be an outsider in Karbi Anglong also, which is, you can be an Assamese and still be outsider in Karbi Anglong, in one district, for example. In fact, we did a story which said that 61% of the population in a tribal known district like Karbi is non-Karbi. So non-tribal population is much more. So Northeast, I mean, it looks nice and all, but it's no European Union. So an Assamese is as much an outsider in Mizoram as a Mizo is an outsider in Nagaland. I'm an outsider in every state that I visit for work, for example. There is that. So right. In terms of stories, in Sikkim, for example, the outsider point has now been brought up after a small protest in Jantar Mantar, and now Sikkim is demanding ILP. Manipur has gone beyond ILP and now they are setting up a population commission to set up NRC, for example. Meghalaya legislator passed the ILP, but it's not been implemented because the BJP doesn't want it. So,
can I add something?
Yeah. So these
just one
quickly,
point. Yes, quickly,
because I have one more question.
Yeah, sure. No, I think just to respond to Amit, that even within Northeast, not just Northeast, any society or community for that matter, you will find a vocabulary very sort of organic to that language, to the word outsider. So if you look at any community within Northeast, say Missings, Mipak is an outsider. If you go to Khasis, you will have an outsider. So that the word does exist and it does replicate in everyday life as well.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Dakar and so on and so forth. So I have a question about, we are sitting in Delhi and this is after all a media event. So I would like to ask a question about the national media's role, and I'd like to ask it to you, Nazim, about the national media's coverage and role in driving the politics of NRC, CAA, and where do you see this going?
Well, if you talk about national media, I divide it in, many people divide it in two segments. One is Godi media, which is very popular these days, and one is liberal media. But when we talk about liberal democratic spaces, so-called, then when we talk about these outsiders, I'll just come to, again, the specification of the outsider, how this outsider of Assam is different than the outsider of Tamil Nadu or some other place. The stories of the outsiders are not given space neither by Godi media nor by the liberal media. You write mail to the liberal spaces, they will not even reply. You just tell how many stories they have done from marginalized sections or marginalized places on Northeast India. We have representative from NDTV located in one representative is there in Northeast India. But how many stories he does on the bad roads of Nagaland? You see the condition of the roads. You need to travel 100 kilometers, you need to spend 6 hours. Your vehicle speed is 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers per hour. Then, I'll just add one more point, how this outsider thing is different than in Tamil Nadu and in other states and in Assam. These outsider things are, on the basis of the categorization of outsider, policies are shaped, like NRC, de-voter. Now, government is taking stringent mechanism, barbaric mechanism like evictions on the outsiders. On the premised on the basis of what? Doubt. I mean, in Assam, it is unfortunate that many cases are happening of human rights violation. And if you just label the word called de-voter, doubtful, you are excused. I'll just take one more second. In 2012, 12 or 13, I have forgotten, there was a kind of riot between Bodos and the Miyas there. It was a kind of a serious violence there. And I am from Bodoland, I am from that region. Many of my, people from my villages are missing. Even still they are missing even today, for years. But the stories I read in media is that this is a clash between Bangladeshi illegal immigrants and between Bodos. Like how it is possible? My own uncle got killed in the conflict, right? And they are not Bangladeshis. And whenever I would like to tell this to audience, whenever you heard this word Bangladeshi in Assam, no, you please understand that they are referring to a Miya Muslim who is very much Indian. They are very much serving in the Indian armed forces. They are very much working day and night for the upliftment of Ahomia society, Assamese society, for India, for Assam. This is completely misplaced. This is completely a political agenda that is they are playing. That is I wanted to. Yeah.
Okay. I want to just add one. Okay. In the question of outsiders, I think Nagaland is unique because the constitution has granted them the 371A in the constitution to give them the right to protect their land and their property. So in this case, in Nagaland's case, there's actually no room to debate for outsiders to claim for the rights or property or anything. So I think in this sense, Nagaland is probably unique than the rest of the other Northeastern states.
Okay.
I'll just add one thing that I think we depend too much on mainland media, to be honest. As somebody who works in the Northeast, I mean, you can read a lot of media from the Northeast now. They are available. I mean, read Mojo. He's talking about roads. We've been writing about 4 years now. In fact, this is the first time we did a story recently where the Nagaland CM has accepted in the assembly that the Kohima-Dimapur road lane expansion may never happen. The CM is on record in the assembly saying that forget that road, it's been 20 years, it will never get completed. And he incidentally cited 371A. He said that it's too much of power to the local people. Yeah, so this, like the CM is blaming local people for not completion of projects and mainland media is not writing about it because the same happened with the Assam-Mizoram border clash. When 6 people were shot, we were getting calls as if it happened, all happened in a day. And we had to tell them that, listen, we've been writing about it for 10 months now. There have been escalations, buildings were burned down, property was vandalized, farms where trucks had gone into farms of whether you see it as Assam or Mizoram. So I think it's about time that people here also start reading media from the Northeast instead of just hoping that, Express or, no offense, but Express or Wire will tell you everything. There's only so much space. Most mainland media have one correspondent in a state.
No, I just want to add to this because you mentioned Wire. There's something to say, when we were reporting on NRC initial days, I think Wire was the first to bring to the national media through a video, this thing that who is a de-voter and all of that. Okay, so when we were, I was writing at the time saying that who are in the jails, these so-called detention centers. And I found that many of these people who were there are actually people from Hindu, Bengali origin, and not the Muslims. But what you see is in the national media at the time was that. And finally, at the end, when this whole NRC thing came, I think Wire was spot on.
Right. Okay.
We have, though we have focused much on Assam, actually the entire Northeast is outsider from the perspective of India. So that is one. And regarding the Wire, of course, we are very happy when the Wire came up. I was personally very happy, but the kind of space they should have given, I mean, not only the Wire, the media platforms like the Wire, there are many, they did not give. The plights of the people there are manifold. And second thing is that now we all know the problems. We should see how the problem should not get worse. We should look into that.
I agree. And on that happy note that, yes, as you can see, as the audience can probably see, there are many of these issues and they're contentious. And the framing of insider and outsider might see, in some cases, for example, the national media being framed as an outsider in the Northeast and vice versa. So even those identifications happen. So on that note, I think I'll open it up for questions. And I see that we are fortunate to have here the doyen of writing about our region, Sanjoy Hazarika. So I'll take the first question from Sanjoy.
As in all such conversations, the first question is, can you hear me? Yes, okay. There's no such thing as a national media, they're only metro media. That's a very fundamental fact. The second thing is, I'm very glad you pointed out the issue of the pejorative that is being used to describe a particular community, because that's become like standard par for the course. The third point I want to make is very simple, is that, I think one of you referred to it, is that in many ways everybody is an outsider and everybody is also an insider. The insider becomes an outsider somewhere else. And whether you're a Dakar or any other, Bahari or Manhu, it's something that we all need to be cognizant. The last point, very quickly, is one positive thing is that people are voting with their feet. Many people, you look at this group here, Sangeeta, Samrat, Suraj to some degree is here and there. A lot of people are moving out of the Northeast in search of opportunities and jobs. I wish the reverse was also true. And I think people are indicating that they want safety, security, peace, and all the things that go with it. A good education, livelihood, stability. I think that's one thing that I've seen certainly in the last few decades.
Thanks, Sanjoy. That sums up a lot of things. Suraj, you want to say something?
Brief response. Thank you, Sanjay. I think my point about saying that there is a term for outsider in every community is not to dilute the fact that there is no parallel between me and Ahom being an outsider to a missing in Assam to a Bangladeshi becoming an outsider in Assam. There is no parallel to that. And we shouldn't be diluting that. My point was not because of to indicate that, but to state that there is a distinction and difference.
I would like to add just one line. Thank you, Sanjay sir, for your comment. One line I found it very interesting. Outsider is insider somewhere, right? But those who are outsider in Assam, they are not insider anywhere. For instance, if we talk about Miyas, where are they outsider? Where are they insider? They are not insider anywhere. If you call them outsider there in Assam where they are born and brought up, they are not insider anywhere. They are always outsider. They live out as outsider. They die as outsider. That is what I wanted to add.
I see a hand at the back over there.
Hi, my name is Vasudha. So I just wanted to say there can be different ways of trying to define that. And one way could be of trying to see who is someone who works in an area, who is serving the community there. And if that could be a way to define an insider for a region, and can the media also try and shift the definition of an insider and an outsider based on that kind of a definition? Would that help, or is that possible? That was my question.
many things are possible provided it's done. And I just suddenly remembered, when you talked about someone who had worked for the community, there was this gentleman, Sanjay Ghosh, who used to work within the community in Majuli. And people really liked his work, loved him. But then he unfortunately got killed. It was the peak of militancy, and the Ulfa killed him, and calling him an outsider. So this is amazing that the local people disagreed with him. And so that's something which is workable, okay? And the other instruments that I see the government bringing, say even Assam Accord is an instrument, to define who is an outsider and insider. All these ADCs are, the councils are, or if Naga Accord happens, it will be one, okay? But the thing is that all the time these things are brought in by the governments without, in a sense that they're not able to bringing an instrument where it doesn't encourage an upheaval among the other communities. So that is what, when Assamese language in Assam was to be, when the states were being divided in terms of language, Assamese language, the government decided, state government, that this will be so then suddenly in Barak this happened, and they were a very small community. How would they fight, And then they tried to take help from neighboring Bengal, and Bengal had to push for this. And why? But paying another price, which is Nepali had to be recognized in other language in Bengal. So that is this very interesting coincidence, So this is what the problem is,
Yeah, so basically for every issue, once we start digging, it goes back, way back, because you find that now they might have hit headlines, but as you dig, you find that, it happened 50, 100, 150 years ago, there was something going on. Sir, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I rather want to make a comment. We all started from the position of insecurity, existential questions. I just want to leave a thought with the friends. See, the whole discourse of minority in India is confined to religious and linguistic minority. But if you look at the UN documents on minority, it starts with national or ethnic minority, and then it goes to religious minority, and then to linguistic minority. But somehow in India's minority discourse, we have completely forgotten national and ethnic minority. I'm just wondering, is it because of this unaddressed issue in terms of our policy gap in the very foundation of our constitution that the sense of insecurity of many people started? And then, of course, things multiply. So the fear is that you fear and you start to protect, and then you hit on other people's fear, and so it continues. I mean, Northeast is a very unique situation, but it is not so unique. If you cross the border in Myanmar, things are not too different from Northeast. There is a recognition of ethnic minorities, whether it is Chin, Kachin, Karen, San. If you go to China, for example, the idea of ethnic minority is very well embedded, even though Yunnan province is also a huge kind of array of cultures. Ethnic minorities are very well recognized there, and their protection is part of the constitutional framework there. I mean, undemocratic as they may be. But in India, there is a huge gap. There are ad hoc arrangements in terms of one peace negotiation here, one peace negotiation there. But there's no comprehensive understanding of how are we going to deal with this national stroke ethnic minorities in this country. So perhaps we need to go back to our drawing board and see, is this the point where we need to start working on? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last question, please.
Yeah, my question is to Sangeeta ma'am. You mentioned about diversity, right? Like Assam has a large diversity. But I think like the entire problem of Assam is that it doesn't have diversity at all.
So are you from Assam?
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't have diversity, because when you talk about like the entire unrest within Assam is because like diversity comes with equality. And in Assam, it's a plural society where, like, the society is divided into hierarchy. So pluralism comes with hierarchy, but diversity comes with equality. Like, you give equal space to every ethnic community, or even, like, example for Deuri. Deuri as a community, or Missing as a community, is getting extinct. Why? Because there is not, like, we don't give equal space to them. That is where the demand is coming, like this autonomous council demand of Deuri or Missing, and Borough has already got it, right? So I think, like, the issue is that, like, we talk about diversity, but then the society is plural. It's not diverse.
He's pointed out correctly. So that's the thing, but when you, of course, it has to be recognized that this hegemony of the non-tribal Assamese on the tribals, it has to be recognized. And so that is all the fount of all that, like this wanting to have their own governance system. So that's the reason you have these autonomous councils. But then my question was that has it been able to solve that problem? As Bablu Loitambam has just pointed out now, we need to perhaps look at this. There are multiple instruments being brought. Like if you go to Manipur, to the Churachandpur side, which borders Myanmar, you will see that all they are demanding is not a state, but they said, give us what you gave to the Boros. Okay. Boros are very unhappy. And they said, no, you give us a new accord now. And will that solve? And very interesting, the Boro Accord, it's been signed, given the reins to a community where they are in a minority in that region, So that had led to other problems, okay? So that is what I feel that one needs, Indian state will have to somehow think of a newer way to address this. Yes, if you want to continue playing politics, you can very well do it, what is happening now. But if you want people to live together, and it's a very interesting, when you see the Indian map, where do you see the most diversity? You see it in that region. So it makes all the more reason and sense to actually bring something, which is workable there. Another reason is also we're so obsessed with this Pakistan and all of that. All the international borders are on that side. Let's look at that side too, with some long-term solution.
And just one point. The newer way Sangeeta is talking, the newer way Indian state should focus is to learn to treat human beings as human beings. That is the only way. If you identify Muslims as Muslims, if you identify Nagas as Nagas, if you identify one community as that community, okay, that someone has died, okay, he's from which community? He's Bihari, okay, fine, no problem. That, if that attitude is there will not be, no matter how much peace treaty you sign, no matter how much instrument you bring in, nothing will solve. Learn to treat human being as human being.
Yeah, completely agree, because that is where what made us, when this whole NRC thing was happening, updating was happening, what moved a lot of people across is that because many people were not treated as human beings and as per law. So that's something, two things we need to keep in mind.
Right. Okay, I think we're clean out of time. So I hope you've enjoyed the discussion. I think it was a lively one, and we covered a fair amount of ground in the time available. So thank you very much.